All right. NASDAQ moving to a new low as predicted. Again, it's likely in a bottoming process. Great Scott, did you hear what I just said? It's likely in a bottoming process. The institutions, why I say likely is because the institutions are going to make that choice, not me. Stop selling and we carve out a bottom. If they stop selling, we will bottom. Key support, which I will be showing to you on NASDAQ, and Nvidia is coming right into key support at 97. Above it, just in the low 100 area. We got more earnings in the after hours here with Microsoft and AMD. We'll look at those briefly. Tomorrow we have Meta. A lot of important stocks. I have time to mention them all. They're the most anticipated earnings. And then after the bell on Thursday, we're going to get the Fed meeting, by the way, tomorrow. And then after the bell on Thursday, we'll have Amazon, Apple, we'll have Intel, Coinbase, other important ones. We'll have Exxon and Chevron. A lot of important stocks this week and next week, a lot of S&P companies. But after the bell, we did get AMD and we did get Microsoft. AMD says data center sales more than doubled in a year. They beat on earnings per share, and revenue. Now, AMD was down about 1%, just under 1% during the session. Currently, right now, it's up 6% in after hours. We'll be watching to see how that influences the NASDAQ tomorrow, and we got the Fed meeting. Looks like Microsoft shares drop as cloud miss overshadows than expected revenue and earnings. You can see here they beat on both of those. Let's take a look at the stock real fast. Microsoft was down 0.89% for the session. Currently it's down over 5%. So you have AMD up over 6% at the moment anyways, right around 6.30 at the moment. And Microsoft is down over 5% at the moment. So and then those other important earnings after the bell that I mentioned tomorrow and on Thursday for the Wall Street darling stocks. Again, I warned you, Nvidia has topped. A very, very good chance Nvidia has topped. And if so, I've been saying since July 11th when we had that CPI sell-off, the NASDAQ, we had the same thing with the semiconductors and with Nvidia. Again, it got a lower high. NASDAQ made a higher high. So did the semiconductor ETF. They diverged. I told you NASDAQ has likely peaked. Nvidia probably already peaked. I don't think S&P has peaked yet. I think S&P is going to go back up and make a new high and diverge with NASDAQ in the weekly time frame. But again, I was warning you. Reversal on the 11th with NASDAQ and here on Nvidia. Semiconductors, again, they diverged. Again, we had the confirmation here, we had the follow through here, and we got the sell-off back to the 100. Now, Nvidia is probably getting ready to put in a bottom and go back and fill the gap at 126. You got the gap here, a little bit lower, and you got the gap fill here at 126. That comes into this trend line right here. So that's where I think we're likely headed, going back to fill that gap. In all likelihood, once we bottom out, you're at your 100 period moving average. You got support, horizontal support from this level here at 97.39, and that is intersecting with this rising trend. So again, right below, and we're just above 100 right now. Nvidia closed at 103.73, so we're just above it. And again, we were down under the 100-day moving average at the 102.5 area there. So again, I think we're going to end up going a little lower. We may try to bounce and then go a little lower, or we may just go a little bit lower with the Fed here. But I think this week we're going to bottom. I think you've got a good chance Nvidia is going to bottom right here and rebound back up to come up here and try to fill this gap at 126, maybe even overthrow this trend line. Trend lines change, and then come back down and go down. And maybe you get this head and shoulders down to 75 here. So again, I think you've got the good shot at the head and shoulders, but I think you're probably going to try to fill this gap and then come down, and then we'll get the rate cut September 18th. You'll get a little bounce out of that for a couple of weeks probably, and then we'll sell off October on into the November election surrounding uncertainty. Once we have the election, we could try to rebound or bottom with that, sell off going into the holidays and try to rebound with that. I think you're going to try to rebound with the November election. Sell off here. I think the head and shoulders here could complete ahead of the election I think we are in a topping process with Nvidia, and I do believe Nvidia has already started the bear market, as I keep saying, and I think NASDAQ has already started the bear market. I don't think S&P has. I still think S&P is going to a higher high, probably the Dow, going up and testing the long-term trend line one more time here. I think you can get a bottom at this level. Now I'm going to show you this level right here, this trend line and this trend line on the weekly chart real fast, and I'll show you the NASDAQ. This is what I think is going on. Again, if we can form a bottom with the July 31st FOMC meeting here, I think you could bottom in this area just under the 100 period. We're testing the 20-week. If these levels break, then you've got the 200 and the 75 area of support. I think you're going to try to bottom right here at this 97, 97 area or so for Nvidia. And I do think a head and shoulders pattern is likely under construction. I do think the gap will likely get filled, and we'll end up seeing something that looks like that. Actually, probably coming down here a little bit lower, and then seeing something that comes like that. And then I think you'll get a move back to 75.60, and then a bounce that will take you back to this 97 area. So that's what I think we've got going on here. I believe that Nvidia peaked on June 20th, so I think NASDAQ likely has. Likely Bitcoin has, turning off of resistance again. Bitcoin, if it's trying to form a top right now, as I keep saying, the stock market could try to form a bottom. Right now they currently have a negative correlation. Let me just show you the weekly chart. I'll show you where these trend lines intersect in the weekly time frame back to the October 2022 low for Nvidia. So we're coming into major support right here after this decline. I think it's highly probable these gaps get filled. Here's a weekly chart for Nvidia. If these gaps get filled, if Nvidia finds a bottom, goes back to fill those gaps, the semiconductors, the same thing, then NASDAQ will bottom. And again, here you have, again, I just showed you this on the daily chart. This is the horizontal support at 97. This is the rising trend line that you just saw up close, going all the way back to the October 2022 low. And again, I think you got a good shot. We're going to try to bounce. We're at the 20-week moving average here. In the weekly time frame, we are at the 100 in the daily, trying to bounce a little bit off that 100. My guess is we're going to drift a little bit lower and try to bounce around these levels, go back up to 96, go back up to 126, and fill those gaps right there. This horizontal line is that trough low that separates those two peaks. We got the lower high, low miniature double top here on Nvidia. So again, if Nvidia can bottom here, I think you got a good shot. So I keep saying it again. Told you last Thursday. We saw the NASDAQ move to a lower low, which we did today. Again, I'll be looking for a bottom. I believe the NASDAQ is bottoming. I think the S&P will bottom. I do think we're going lower. I think you're probably going to see a bottom this week surrounding these levels. You will see the shorts cover their positions, take profits. I think you'll see the buy the dip crowd come in. I think that you will see the semiconductors and Nvidia likely try to bottom this week, assuming that we can reach these levels and we go a little bit lower. But this is what I think is likely going to be the case. I think Nvidia is going to hit this 50 level on the RSI, come back up, and likely confirm a lower high. You got the same thing here on my oscillators. It's just all over the place. The diversions have formed on the oscillators. So again, I think we're going to try to bounce off this level. I think you're going to try to bottom. A breach of this level and this horizontal support could take us a whole lot lower, down to the 50-week or down to this level right here. That 76 level, I believe it was. We looked at it up close, and again, that possible head and shoulders forming immediately should we get this dramatic drop below this level. My guess is we're going to try to bounce here and go back and fill the gaps, then come back down and hit this level. And I think you've got a massive head and shoulders that will form here if we bounce and then go back, fill the gaps, and then break it. But again, if Nvidia can bottom around these levels, horizontal support, the rising trend, semiconductors can bottom, then the S&P can bottom. NASDAQ can bottom, and if NASDAQ, Nvidia, and the semiconductors are all bottoming, S&P is likely going to bottom and probably rally up and make new highs. So again, this is we're going to form a bottom. Now, if the institutions decide that that's not going to be the case and they decide they want to keep selling tech, well, then we're going to break these levels. So we'll see what happens. But I think you got a good shot at a bottom. Now, we were told this sell-off, we had the reversal there in early July 4 weeks ago. We've had 3 weeks of selling here. Told there's no possible way this could happen. And again, I keep telling you, the market is topping. Listen to me. we're going to likely try to bottom soon. Probably trying to carve out a bottom now, this week. We're going to see people locking in gains on their short positions. In all likelihood, that's going to create buying pressure up. We're going to see the buy the dip crowd come back in. And if the institutions will stop selling, likely carve out a bottom. So Nvidia could be holding the secret to a possible bottom. And it could be, again, we try to bottom this week with the Fed or with earnings or whatever. But again, I'm looking for a push a little bit lower here. I think you're going to get a powerful rebound on Nvidia back to 126 to fill that gap. That double top confirmation, I've talked about this chart at great length of detail back up at the top. Again, I told you that on the 11th that the semiconductors have likely peaked, which again, the day before the NASDAQ was higher, it peaked. 100 peaked the day before. I told you that has likely started the bear market with the semiconductor, with the CPI sell-off. We had these bearish engulfing candlesticks above the upper Bollinger Bands, and again, back-to-back bearish engulfing here for the June and the July peak. It diverged with Nvidia. It diverged, forming this negative divergence with the RSI and the MACD, and we saw the drop below the 10 period. We've gapped lower, and again, eventually, I think these gaps are going to get filled. We have one right here, and we have one up here. I think these gaps like Nvidia are going to get filled, and I think we'll eventually bottom. I think we're probably going to push a little bit lower and try to bottom out and make our way back up. Now, at the same possibility of the head and shoulders formation here with the semiconductor ETF SMH. I think we're going down to 198. I think we're going to go a little bit lower through the lower Bollinger Band here again, and then I think you're going to bottom. That could be this week. I think with the semiconductors, we're completing a 5-leg push lower, 1, 2, 3, 4, and now I think we're getting 5, just like the NASDAQ, and then I think you're going to rebound back up. So I think you're going to have a big move back up with the semiconductors if the signals, if the signals can turn back to bullish. This assumes that the institutions will stop selling tech, selling the semiconductors. Yes, as they're going to. Semiconductors are breaking this trend line here. Going back to the October 2023 low, and again, we're breaking that. I think we're doing what Bitcoin did. We broke the trend line, and then I think we're going to rally hard and get back right back above it once we bottom out. We're seeing momentum move to an extreme. The negative diversions played out beautifully, but we're seeing it move to an extreme here, so I think you're in a bottoming process. But like I said, I still think we go a little bit lower. This marked a major bottom here. This marked a major bottom over here. Again, if Nvidia can bottom out at a little bit lower, I think the semiconductors will as well, and I think NASDAQ will find a bottom. You know, the S&P had tried to break this level last week, got back above it. Now it's trying to break it again. If we just keep going, you could sell off to the 200 and this horizontal level. You got the head and shoulders. We can bottom and try to bounce. You can go back, fill the gap, move to new high, and then come back and do it. And if you do that, you can form a divergence on the RSI here, or even get a fresh, brand new divergence over here, if that is the case. But again, the only ones that are going to be making that decision are the people, the power to do it, and that's the institutions. Will they stop selling or not? S&P can go down to the 50% retracement here, still breach this level, but then still get back above it like Bitcoin did. And again, it's still possible we go a little bit lower and then just come back up and still go higher. Trend lines do change all the time, but this is the trend line here from the October 2023 low, and we're trying to breach that level. And you have this longer term trend line from October of 2022, which eventually we're going to move back towards that. Again, the question is, will the institutions stop selling and we try to carve out a bottom? I think that's very, very possible. Keep in mind, signals remain bearish. There's no guarantee we go back, fill the gaps, and we want to see a reversal happen. That is going to be the case. If no reversal happens, it's not going to be the case. So I hope you hear what I'm saying. Again, a bottom could form here. Do I think a bottom will? Probably, because I have the guts to tell you what I think. There's no guarantee if the institutions blow past this level of support. So keep that in mind. Now, S&P is not moving to a new low yet. I told you yesterday, again, we might try to move on the S&P towards the 50 period. We gapped higher, we moved towards it, we got a topping tail, and then we sold off for much of the day there towards the very end. We got a rebound. But I told you again, I was expecting these divergences to form. I still think the S&P is probably going to move to a new low. NASDAQ's probably going to move down towards the 18,400 area, couple hundred points below today's intraday low. Again, told you that I thought that a divergence would develop here on the MACD. So far we have a higher low, and again, you could just get a confirmation of a higher low if we try to bottom. Guesses we're probably not done yet. We'll see what happens with the Fed. I continue to point out the Fed meetings are calling tops, bottoms, and continuation of the trend. Now, we've already had a peak. The last one, again, was a continuation of the trend. We went higher, okay, but then we reversed, and now at the next meeting, we've already given back all the gains of that rally. Now, this meeting is either going to be a continuation of the trend down to this level here. We'll get the continuation down, or we'll get a bottom and go back and try to fill the gaps surrounding the Fed meeting. Sometimes it's the very day of the Fed meeting, but it's surrounding it. The bottom, we still may go a little bit lower and then bottom out after the Fed, or to rally with the Fed, and then could get the continuation down. But again, it's likely we're not going to get a top here because we've had a sell-off that's either going to be a continuation of the trend or it's going to mark a bottom, one or the other. Which one this is. Meetings have been calling tops, bottoms, and continuations of the trend. Top, continuation, bottom, bottom, continuation, continuation, top, bottom, and again, you got the bottom, and then we had the meeting. The times you get these tops or bottoms turning with the meeting, and here we had a bottom continuation. We peaked, and now, again, this is either going to be a bottom or a continuation of the trend, one or the other. We're selling off into a Fed meeting. Please support the channel with the link directly below. That allows me to be able to provide you this information. Follow the link below to take you to a secure site. You can donate any amount you want. Take a moment to do that. I would really, really appreciate it. I really need your help in order to make it work. I just put everything out there for free and just ask that you do what you can to help out. I need to hear from you to make it work. So if you can take a moment to do that, I would really, really appreciate it. It takes a lot of time and effort to do this. I just show you the stuff I'm looking at every single day. It takes time to make a video and put it all in there. So if you could take a moment to help out, I would really, really appreciate it. Thank you. Warned you at the July 10th top that NASDAQ was slamming up into this trend line right here, which was parallel to this lower boundary right here. And again, this trend line right here, this is the linear scaling, intersected with that level. And we got that topping tail. I told you the next week I told you this on July 12th, I expected a wide range red bar for the following week, which we got when we had the close there that week after we got the topping tail on the 12th of July. On the 11th of July, when we had the 500-point sell-off, we started that reversal process on and closed below the upper Bollinger Band on NASDAQ. I told you on July 11th that NASDAQ likely has peaked on July 10th, and I was expecting a lower high. I did expect a rally, which did happen to the 78.6 Fibonacci, but I expected more selling, and I expected this red bar for the following week, which we did get. Told you that, again, the linear scaling, that we could come back to this trend line right here. We had already reached it pretty much on the log scaling, but again, looking for this level or even overthrowing it just a little bit. You have, again, horizontal support here, and you have the trend line here. Go a little bit lower. I think we're going to go down to the 61.8 fib, near the 18,400 area on S&P, on NASDAQ. Under this level of support right here, which I'll show you, very similar to what Nvidia is doing, going down, I think directly below. Horizontal support there, I told you at 97, and the rising trend line. And I think we're going to likely hit that horizontal support on NASDAQ, go back up and fill the gaps. I think that a bottom was likely formed. Now, again, if the signals continue to remain bearish, are you listening carefully? If the signals continue to remain bearish and we break these levels, Nvidia breaks down below support levels, and we just start seeing selling resume by the institutions, then we can continue on lower. A decision's going to be made, and it's not going to be made by me. It's not going to be made by you. It's going to be made by institutions that control this. They stop selling and let the retail investors come in. They're going to go, you know, those people that told us, the herd, they told us this wasn't going to happen. NASDAQ's now dropped well over 10%. Maybe I'll get you the exact number here. If we a little bit lower, run into key support, and we could see a bottom, the people that told us that this wasn't going to happen, they'll buy it, we'll claim it's over, and we'll go back up and fill the gaps, and then we're going to likely complete the topping process. I told you I'm looking for a topping process. I told you I was looking for higher levels, overthrow the trend lines that I talked about into them, and we overthrew them, like the trend line right here. And I told you that, and this is a linear scaling. Scaling, it's a little bit different, a little bit higher up. We're through these levels and we hit these trend lines on the linear scaling. I just want to say again, I predicted it would go higher. I keep saying my signals remain bullish, but I'm looking for a top. And then I told you when we got the topping tail, that was likely it. And then on July 11th, I told you that I believed that the top was in on July 11th and 12th, and that we get an evening star reversal, evening star in the weekly time frame. Told you that on July 12th. Have been talking about that ever since it formed, and ever since linear scaling. Here's a log scaling. You got a rising wedge with the log scaling again. Tag the 20-week. We tagged the trend line here in the log scaling last week, and we're trying to breach it ever so slightly here. You got these divergences. I told you again, I think that we're probably setting up a bottom and set up a lower high. You got the MACD rolling over. I think the MACD, if conditions keep selling, we're going to go down here, and you're going to see this drop further. But it could do something like what we had over here, where it rolled over. You got this divergence, but then it turned back up, and you got this lower high here bouncing off the 20-week moving average. I think you're going to see that over here, and I think you're going to form a topping process, and I think we're going to fill the gaps at 20,400, and then I think you're going to come back down to this level and get your head and shoulders in all likelihood. Here's a daily chart on the NASDAQ 100. I've drawn the trend line from the October 2023 low here in black, and again, we're slightly violating that here on the NASDAQ here with our log scaling. Below that, I have a red trend line going back to the January 2023 low, the higher low that's set up. This October 2022 low is back over here. Again, this is the log scaling. This is the level I wanted to show you. This horizontal support on the NASDAQ, 18,464. This trend line below that, if we continue to sell, you have that red trend line here going back to that January 2023 low. But this 18,400 area, that's where our just above our 61.8 Fibonacci for the NASDAQ of the advance right here, of the advance from the low right here. I'm watching that level, and that's directly below where we are. So I think we're going to breach this trend line like Bitcoin did. It breached the trend line, but then it got back above it. I think that's going to happen in all likelihood with the NASDAQ if Nvidia bottoms around 97 and then rallies back up to 126. I think NASDAQ can bottom here and rally back up to 20,400. Versions played out nicely. Check daily chart here. Now, if I bring it up close, you can see again, here's that level right here. This horizontal support is at the 18,460-ish range there. Above that, we have our gap fill right here at 18,653, which again, we're just above that today at the 100 period, the pink line. I think we're going to go down a little bit lower, fill this gap at 18,653, and maybe go as low as the 61.8 Fibonacci. I went too low. This 18,400 area here, I think we're going to go down to this level, and I think you're going to get another push below the lower Bollinger Band here. I think you're going to bottom out, rally back up to this 20,400 area, and I think you'll get your lower high. That's what I think is going to happen. So again, I think a bottom is about to happen. Did you hear what I said? Now, I warned you about the divergences on the NASDAQ, like right here, this triple divergence that had formed with a rising wedge. Told you right here, when we topped the 10th, told you the very next day, I thought we peaked for a lower high to the 78.6 Fibonacci. We got it, and then we broke down this level, and I told you we're going to see an ugly sell-off, and we did. And those divergences were going to play out on the weekly chart and on the daily chart. Now we're at extremes again, and over here, well, when we got to extremes, it marked a bottom. So again, I'm looking for a bottom here just beyond the 100 period. I think that it will be just beyond the 100. I talked about that before, how we formed that bottom just beyond the 100 period moving average. Period moving average, very important on the S&P 500 and NASDAQ. NASDAQ will probably move beyond it. S&P will probably move closer to it. I think you're going to bottom if the institutions allow that to happen, which I do think that is likely. If they don't, then we come all the way back down to the 17,000 area. If the signals just remain bearish and we don't see them let up, you've got the 200 here, you've got this level here, and that assumes that we just continue to sell. I think you're going to get something like this where we go back up, but then we sell off going into the September 18th meeting. And Do bottom here again. You've got your 61.8 Fibonacci in the same area as horizontal support, and above that you have this gap fill at 18,653. Here on the daily chart, if we look at the linear scaling, again, we're just coming right to that trend line with the log. We've slightly breached it. So again, I think you're going to overthrow this level just a little bit and hit these levels and then try to come back up. Now again, that assumes you see evidence of a bottom. You can get that this week. The divergences are already forming on the NASDAQ 60-minute chart. I have the close of the month tomorrow. You've got a nasty looking topping tail in the monthly time frame. So again, the NASDAQ has peaked. The S&P can get back-to-back topping tails if it goes back up and fills the gaps. NASDAQ, another nightmare of a day down. At the lows, we were down about almost 400 points. Closed down that far. We rebounded back up. We closed down 263 points, down 1.38%. But we were down at the lows of the session. The 18,667 low is just above the gap fill area, 18,653. Closing at 18,000, just under 18,800. Moving well off of those lows, but still a very ugly trading day for the NASDAQ. And I believe we have a head and shoulders pattern. Whether that continues to play out immediately or whether we rebound and then it plays out, we'll see if the institution stops selling. My guess is you got a pretty good shot of bottom's going to develop in this area. On the 60-minute chart of the NASDAQ, I warned you about the diversions at the top, the sell-off with the CPI. I told you we were going to come back to these Fibonacci retracements. We did right on the nose to the 78.6 Fibonacci, and then the bottom started falling out of NASDAQ, as I correctly predicted would happen. A bounce here, I told you it wasn't over. We gapped lower. Got a bounce here, and I told you it is still likely not over. We ended up forming a bear flag. We gapped higher with the session today, but they ended up selling off, and we're coming back towards our gap fill. Again, we were just above it. Our gap fill at 18,653. We were just above that level. I think we're going to come down to it. Maybe go down towards the 18,400 level or so. Beyond it is our 61.8 Fibonacci. We'll see if we reach that far down. But again, where that horizontal support level is at the 18,460 range as well. Our prior peak, you can't see it on the 68-minute chart. I told you I thought we'd move to a new low. What are we doing? We're moving to a new low. Now again, even though I predicted this was going to happen, I'm also warning we might form a bottom this week with earnings or the Fed or both. We'll see what happens. I think that we're likely going to get another push down. I don't think this is done yet. S&P is not moving to a new low yet. It probably will. Sometimes they diverge at turning points. We'll see, but I think a divergence is forming here on the RSI. Don't think it's done yet. I think the MACD will push down a little bit further, and then I think you'll complete it, and I think you have your bottom. Then I think we're going to do what Bitcoin did, break the trend line in the daily, but then get back above it and break this downward trend line. And when that happens, we should be seeing a big move that takes us back up to the 20,400 area. So again, I think that tomorrow, maybe the following day when we push on down, maybe it's tomorrow with the Fed or with the earnings we're going to get here. Important earnings coming up. I've mentioned, I think we'll get a bottom. And then I think we're going to see the shorts cover their positions and take profits. The dip crowd comes in. We run it back up. So we'll see what happens. Guarantee we fill the gaps. No guarantees the institution stops selling. But I think you got a pretty good shot that it happens here. And again, filling the gap and then hitting our 61.8 Fibonacci. I'll show you that in 2 seconds. By the way, I told you to watch this trend line and the 200. We gapped higher. And then we went back and tested the overhead resistance. And I got a gap and trap on the intraday charts. Now we're trying to recover. Probably not done yet, and we'll probably still hit a new low, but that was today's price action. Got a little divergence at the lows there, and then attempted a little bit of a recovery. And by the way, again, I told you I was looking for a 5-leg push lower. I think that's going to complete here, and then I think we'll get an ABC move back up and a 3-leg structure back up to fill the gap up here. I think we're going to fill both of these gaps in all likelihood with this next rally that we have. So I think it's going to be a powerful rally back up and recover most of the losses and take us back up towards the highs, but not exceed them towards the 20,400 areas where I think we're headed, probably overthrowing that level just a little tiny bit. And then I think you're going to get a very, very ugly sell-off once we reach that level. Now, here is the Fibonacci's along with the gap fill. Here's the gap fill. You can see that right there. Okay, we're just right above it at the lows today. Here's the horizontal support at the 18,464 level I mentioned. And again, that is right where our 78.6 Fibonacci, or 61 point Fibonacci of this advance right here comes in at. Right there is the 61 point Fibonacci is just below that at the high 18,300 level, just below 18,400. So this is where I think we're going to bottom out, and we'll hit that lower Bollinger Band, overthrow the 100 period, and then I think you're probably going to try to rally back up. Now again, this would all need to confirm that and turn back to bullish. If we break these levels and they remain bearish, then all bets are off. You're going to get a bigger sell-off. I think you're going to bottom here, and I think you're going to go back and fill those gaps because I do believe we're in a topping process. So I think you'll do it sooner rather than later. My signals remain bearish. Just telling you, you're probably going to see the shorts do profit taking and the buy the dip crowd come back in. The shorts will flip the trade back to long. I think you'll see some buying pressure here and a bottoming process probably here at some point this week, maybe with the Fed tomorrow, maybe with the earnings a day or two, but I think you're going to get a bottom, pretty good shot of a bottom trying to carve out here this week.